Let's be honest, we all seem to start the year off strong with our lesson plans. But as the year goes on, our lesson plans become a little less intentional and a little more on the fly. At least that was my case. We all know that the best lessons come from having at least some sort of plan and structure that thinks ahead of meeting the needs of all learners and makes sure to implement those strategies. That takes a lot of time, though, to plan for the number of different needs and subjects being taught each day. Well, time is something I am passionate about giving back to you. So today, I'm going to try to make lesson planning for ELLs something practical and tangible, because in the end, we all know that when we do take the time to write out clear goals, as well as have appropriate scaffolds and supports in place, the students are guaranteed to get what they need. Now, when working with English language learners, you have double duty on lesson planning, and that's what we'll be discussing in this lesson. I want you to think of your classroom as a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. My apologies if that's making you hungry. We all know that a PB&J is not as tasty with only one of the ingredients. Just peanut butter, it's just too dry, and just jelly is too sweet. But together, it's the perfect combination. That's exactly how the classroom needs to be to support all ELLs. We are going to say the content materials is the peanut butter, and the language support is the jelly. When they are both at work in the classroom, it creates a pretty delicious combination. So how do we make that happen and not spend hours a day planning on ways to differentiate for all levels as well as all the other demands in the classroom? To help lesson planning with ELLs in mind become more clear and easier for you to implement, I'm going to walk you through a process called PLN Plan. These 4 letters will allow you to use whatever lessons you are teaching for the content portion, and in a few additional steps, you will add in the language support necessary for your students. The letter P in the plan strategy stands for purpose. As you begin to take a content-focused lesson and add in the language support, you will want to begin by asking yourself, what is the purpose for my ELL students in this lesson? Do I want them to work on the speaking domain through topics based on the content instruction? Or am I focusing on the writing domain and my purpose is to see how they can use content vocabulary in a sentence? When we define our purpose, we can much more easily define the scaffolds and modifications we need to make sure we are targeting that purpose. Without having a clear purpose, we will easily become overwhelmed with supporting ELLs. The next step is L, which stands for language objectives. Here we are going to take our purpose and put it into a language objective in order to get some serious clarity and direction on exactly what the students will be able to do by the end of the lesson. I want to walk you through how to create language objectives that come directly from your content standards so that you don't have to remake the wheel, but you're adding in the crucial language support to your content area. Let's look at an example of how to create a language objective from a content objective. My goal is to make this as simple as possible for you to be able to come away from this lesson feeling you can begin to write language objectives on your own. Let's begin by clarifying 2 different language skills we will focus on when writing language objectives. The first one is the receptive language, which covers listening and reading. The other one is productive language skills, which covers speaking and writing. This is helpful to be aware of so you can decide if your lesson will be focusing on receptive language skills or productive language skills. Here's a better definition of language skills from Jana Echevarria and Deborah Short. Language objectives are lesson objectives that specifically outline the type of language that students will need to learn and use in order to accomplish the goals of the lesson. Quality language objectives complement the content knowledge and skills identified in content area standards and address the aspects of academic language that will be developed or reinforced during the teaching of grade level content concepts. Let's break down this definition further with these 3 steps. Step number 1 is to know what your content objective is. This is your Common Core standard or whatever standard your school follows. Step number 2 is to know your language proficiency levels of your students. This is necessary to write appropriate language goals. Your language goal for a newcomer will be different than your language goal for an intermediate ELL. Step number 3 is to identify whether you are focusing on receptive or productive language skills. When you have this information, you are ready to use this simple formula to write powerful language objectives. First, you want to identify what the action verb is that the students will be doing. Students will ask, compose, name, predict, share, retell orally are just a few examples. Plus, provide a link to the content, for example, the main idea and detail of the story, plus a scaffold that you will use. Let's look at an example of this in action. So here we have our Common Core standard is to describe characters, settings, and major events in a story using key details. Our content objective is that the students can describe characters in the story using a combination of key details and their own words. To make a language objective, we're going to use our simple formula, and we can come up with a language objective of I can, what do we want them to do? Orally retell. How do we connect it to the standards? The major events in the story. And then what scaffold are you going to use? Using a word bank. That's an example of creating a language objective using your content objective to start with. This might seem like a lot, but I promise the more you practice, the easier it will become. Soon it will become second nature to you. If you get stuck, I recommend using the individual level breakdown PDFs that you will receive in Module 3, 4, and 5. In that document, you will find appropriate verbs to help you easily write language objectives specific to their language abilities. Another way to get better is sharing your language objectives in our Facebook group and asking for feedback. We'd love to help. The third step in the lesson planning process is to choose appropriate scaffolds. When we work with all different levels of ELLs, it's a constant dance of choosing the right scaffolds to support, but not wanting to create dependent learners of needing scaffolds. We need to be aware of when we are scaffolding too much and when they need to be pushed to more independence. This is why I chose the word appropriate, because it is exactly that. Going back to our purpose and knowing our ELLs, we can select different scaffolds that will help them get to the goal. Let's talk about the what and how of scaffolding. First, what can you scaffold? You can scaffold the instruction, the materials and resources, or the student grouping. There are so many ways you can provide support in the lesson, and those little ways you use will make a big difference in the advancement of your students. Let's take a closer look at each way of scaffolding and how exactly you can make that happen. If you zoom in on scaffolding instruction, we can see that by front-loading vocabulary, activating prior knowledge, or repeating, modeling, and paraphrasing are all practical ways to provide support to all levels of ELLs during the instruction time. You will not use all of these in every lesson, so choose one you want to try and put it in your lesson. When we are providing scaffolds for materials and resources, some ways you might do that are through using visuals, using dictionaries, translators, sentence frames, stems, word banks or word walls, interactive strategies, and using multimedia to provide extra support. The last way we can scaffold for ELLs is through student grouping. Thinking ahead of time how you are going to group students can be a powerful way to support ELLs. Are they going to be grouped in whole group, small group, teacher-led small group, paired up, or one by one? As you can see, there are many simple ways you can differentiate for your students. The important thing is to have this in mind before the lesson to make sure you put it in place. So we have covered the P, L, and A in our plan strategy. Let's get to the last step, which is the letter N. N stands for notice. Take a few seconds throughout or at the end of the lesson to notice students struggling with the materials, or students who are really grasping it. You want to be monitoring who might need to be retaught, who might need less support, and be pushed to more independence, and so on. I know you might be thinking, yes, in an ideal world, I would do this, but this will not happen in reality. Well, here are a few easy ways to make sure you take time to notice how the students are taking in what you are teaching them. You can first incorporate visual check-ins during instructions. This could be as simple as them secretly showing you a thumbs up or thumbs down as you are teaching to give you insight into how they are doing. Exit slips are a great way to wrap up a lesson and check in for understanding. When students are working independently, they can use color-coded flip cards to ask for help. Green can stand for doing great, yellow can be I need help but I can keep working, and red would stand for I cannot keep working without you. Doing something like this will allow students to feel comfortable asking for help without having to ask in front of the whole class. We'll talk more about that in Module 3. So there you have it, the plan strategy for lesson planning with ELLs in mind. This week, your challenge is to take one of your content lesson plans and apply the plan strategy to it to make it both a content and language-rich lesson. Make sure to download the lesson plan template included to easily apply the plan strategy. When you're ready, I'll see you in the next lesson.